So if it's in the public square,
Uh-huh.
that's not up to anyone to stop you.
Right. I don't think so either.
Now
If you want to stand out there and say that, I think it's totally healthy that a common person, whoever you are, can go and do that.
yeah.
But again, I don't think that the rise of Nazism was a common
right.
man.
I wish there was a word for that feeling that I get so alive.
Hello, everybody. This is the Millennial Experience podcast, where we talk about some deep issues, sometimes controversial, sometimes just very incredibly interesting. So we hope you enjoy. My name is Luke Adamson,
And I'm Eddie Ambrose.
and together we make up the Millennial Experience podcast. So today, something we've been talking about is free speech and kind of like hate speech,
Right.
and whether or not
Basically, if limitations have to exist when you say free speech.
and where is that line
Right.
of like, this is not okay,
Right.
and where's the line of this is not legal?
Right.
That's what's I think most important to specify, and why.
Right. And the other thing that was concerning us was, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're showing up.
Okay, perfect. At least that fit in. The question was random; it was out of nowhere. But the other thing that was worrying us was when certain governments are in, the fluctuation of the definition of free speech, and when you get labeled one way or another, right, depending on the government, because it's almost as if there's always fluctuating. Oh, I didn't have my own.
Is that good?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay.
And because there's fluctuations in the definition, depending on how people feel and depending on the political climate of that moment.
Mm-hmm. And what we ended up getting into earlier was where, like, so let's say the example you brought up was a Nazi or a white supremacist out in public, like with a megaphone.
Right. I just want to make it clear. Any generalized hate or racism speech, it doesn't have to just be white supremacy. Any kind of supremacy speech,
Mm-hmm.
any kind of that.
Like, we are better than
Right.
them.
Any
we
kind
should have
of
more rights
any
than
kind
them.
of us and them and us higher than them speech.
Yeah.
Right.
And I agree. So I think for me, it's like, where should the government get involved in and decide what's okay to say and what's not okay to say, short of directly saying, go do this violent act, or we need to eradicate this
Right.
type of person? Because to me, those things are already illegal according to our laws.
Right.
You cannot incite violence directly. You can't call. It's more of a call to action. So if you are calling to action the eradication of a race or a person, that's already illegal. So if you're
Right.
doing that with that megaphone in public, absolutely, that's against the law. You can't do that. You should go to jail. But if you are just talking about the philosophy of whatever your opinion is about different races or whatever crazy ideas you might have, it's not illegal as far as I know, because that just falls under the First Amendment. You're allowed to give your opinions on things. According to the law, I think legally you can do that without any legal repercussions.
Right. I agree that you can't really pinpoint a crime on somebody, let's say, suggesting I or we are superior to them, general talk. Okay, whatever talking points exist thereafter, fine. But what the point is here is this is us and we are higher and that is them, and they're gonna bring us down or they're gonna affect us negatively.
Mm-hmm.
That speech for me has implications that when that speech is said is understood the consequences that it's going to have, and yet when you are the speaker of those words, you are protected from having incited any of the violence thereafter. For example, if let's say um, in Germany, you only had the hate speech against the Jewish people,
Mm-hmm.
but not the violence. Like none of the atrocities.
Then there
Could-
wouldn't be as much of an incentive to really crack down on that type of
Right.
free speech.
But since that happened, and that was the result, and although I don't have the details. I'm not sure if Hitler ever actually verbally, you could quote him to have incited direct violence. Possibly, I'm not sure. But if the result was from just hate speech, that wasn't directly violence, but it was us and them speech, and that's what resulted. I think it's worth taking a look at if you can use historical evidence to make certain speech at least of concern. I mean, obviously the authorities are going to determine whether you are arrested or jailed for the speech, which that's where the problem comes in, because you have the First Amendment. But then you have the examples of, if you yell fire or bomb in a crowded room, you could have accidents happen where people get trampled, which again, whatever the definition of inciting, violence happened there too.
Mm-hmm.
In a way. So you have this spectrum that goes all the way from yelling bomb in a theater or fire in a theater to like us and them talk, which almost seems even less harmful, right? Us and them,
Yeah.
than someone yelling fire in a room. It
But-
almost seems less harmful. And
But
in
yelling
fact,
fire in a room it only can potentially hurt a few people, whoever's in the room, basically.
right?
But having that us and them speech
Right.
could, and historically has,
Yeah.
potentially hurt millions of people.
Mhm.
So it's an interesting idea.
Yeah. And I think here we would have to get into if that need be enforced, or, for example, you don't jail people, but you fine them for historically violent
Speech. I don't find them though.
like for example, how you get fined for littering
Uh-huh. Or not
and
wearing
it's
your
kind of like,
seatbelt.
or not wearing your seatbelt, and it's kind of like, it's like, of
That's-
course you have free speech, but like, what are the consequences of yelling fire in a theater? What do you know what the full, like, if you were to be like taken, like prosecuted, the full law of what happens to you, what is the maximum that happens to you? And
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the law says specifically in regard to that.
right.
I assume it's either a fine or some kind of jail time
Right.
for inciting, or especially if someone does get hurt, you would be responsible for that, I'm sure, legally,
Right.
for those penalties, for
Right.
at least their medical bills. But for me, so once you start talking about fines and stuff, what you're saying is we're putting the power into the government's hands to make these decisions. Because when you say fines, that's our court system run.
Right.
Those laws are enacted by the government. They're the ones that get to decide what we're allowed to say and not
Right.
say, which in the case of yelling fire in a movie theater, definitely I think is a no-brainer.
Has a potential
As
risk.
a very direct
Right.
risk where you're
Mhm.
inciting actual
right.
harm
Something to
people.
happen. Something to happen.
Uh-huh. So it's tricky because
Because
someone
you don't
were-
you don't yell fire because it's your opinion in a theater.
right. But if you're out with a megaphone spewing white supremacist rhetoric,
Or any supremacist rhetoric.
Or any
Any
supremacist.
supremacist rhetoric.
any kind of discriminatory
Any-
rhetoric,
yes.
it's not, I think the First Amendment technically covers you. Like, you're allowed to have your opinions in the
Mhm.
public square.
Mhm.
You're allowed to voice your opinion for
Right.
everybody to hear under the law. Now, another thing we were talking about
Mhm.
is,
Your platform, who you are.
yeah. So if it's in the public square,
Uh-huh.
that's not up to anyone to stop you.
Right. I don't think so either.
Now, you
If you want to stand out there and say that, I think it's totally healthy that a common person, whoever you are, can go and do that.
yeah.
But again, I don't think that the rise of Nazism was a common
Right.
Man.
So what you're talking about is
It-
like if a politician
Yes, or someone in authoritative position.
is using their platform like on the
Yes.
news,
Yeah.
for instance, to talk
Yeah.
to spew this, that takes it out of the public square
Yes.
into
Power, into like influence.
hmm But
And I
where
think-
would that line be drawn? So what about influencers like YouTubers or
Yeah, so you know how celebrities had to make a public statement whenever they would get caught using like drugs,
Mhm.
and this was because they know that they are looked up to by so many young people. It was a way to help to make sure that if a young person was to find out that their hero did this or that the person could see a video of them saying, you shouldn't do this,
Mhm.
which is a counterbalance, even though they already committed it. Now, now freedom comes into play, though. For someone who, whether you care or not that your hero did that, maybe you're gonna try it too. Again, you're gonna do whatever you want, but I think I think that in the way that like big money should not be involved in politics, I think certain tactics which were used tactics that were used by authoritative powers should really be considered a little bit harder, whether or not they can be used in campaigns. Like I would say an us and them tactic in politics is not healthy for a society to be able to get together and decide what is the best interest to all of us. Like, where does our main interest align as a whole people? Not just as this us and them tribalism
Right.
that we're sort of forced to stand on this side of the line or that side of the line. What I would say is that you don't use politics of there any line. If it was democracy, people from the West Coast and East Coast should be able to like talk to each other as United States citizens, Americans.
Mhm.
And these are our problems and this is what's happening. Versus like, this is the way you have to do this. No, that's the way you have to do this. Hey, they're wrong. We're right. I think that's unhealthy.
Mhm.
I think we don't realize how unhealthy it is to even split it up.
Yeah. I guess so in Canada, I know there was a bunch of stuff in the news about it. I don't know if the laws were passed. I think they might have. But a lot of other countries, and now including Canada, they have laws about certain things you can and can't say. Like
did they have examples? Like,
the most recent issue with Canada was I don't know if it's called Parliament over there, but
okay, I
they're-
think, yeah.
the politicians were trying to enact laws that made it illegal to call people by the wrong pronouns. So, like with the trans community,
Oh, right.
if you were to refer to someone as one or the other pronoun that they had already told you to refer to them as, you could go to jail.
Right.
Like, it's illegal. So my concern is once you give the government the power to start making these decisions on what's legal and illegal, where is it going to stop? Where's the line drawn about what you can and can't say, and which government, whether it's the left or the right that's currently in charge, they're going to have their own opinions about what is okay for you to say and not say, and it's going to constantly be changing. People are going to go to jail for saying
if there were
their opinions.
I think that if there were any sort of, I'm gonna go ahead and call them rules, since I don't want to use laws, like more guidelines.
Well,
if there was any,
that's an important distinction. though.
yeah, because I don't want to say that there would be a law, since people wouldn't respond to there's laws against killing, but obviously people will have their impulses, and so.
But they'll go to jail.
But
That's
they'll
the
go to
difference.
jail, and so what we're saying is, this is specifically for speech. Like, for example, I don't care that someone is doing hate speech as a common citizen. I do believe in that full freedom of speech as a citizen of a country who has to follow the laws of the government that's been given to them. You should be able to say anything, but I think the rules are enforced in government.
Mm.
The way that like government can't just take over the people. You can't just split us up. That's what I would say.
So
And that's why I said rhetoric that is us and them rhetoric specifically.
okay.
Specifically us and them. And that's why any supremacy falls under that speech, because it's starting to create this is us and that's them.
So as long as you draw the foundation of this
us and
is,
them talk.
this is the specific type of rhetoric
Yeah.
that as a
That
politician,
yeah. When you're
you can't
holding,
use.
when you're trying to get in office, we're assuming government is going to do what the whole of the population decides, whether it's 70%, 51%. But it's your role to do what the 51% want. And so in this case, why then would a politician want to use us and them rhetoric? Don't you want the majority of your state to think, man, a leadership, like it didn't matter what color they were, like it's leadership. This should be the government's role, not the government's role to say like us and them, and that's how they do it, but this is how we do it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I don't care if people did hate speech out in the street, but again, a common person does not have the same protections or powers or authority or anything that higher politicians get.
Right. But so is it the size of your platform that determines what free speech is?
I think, like, I'm going to condense it specifically. Free speech is free speech if you're just a citizen. But when it comes to running for office,
Any political office.
any political office, I think us and them rhetoric, it's just like, look, like, I'm not saying put them in jail for using it, but like, obviously this is something people should understand. Like, you might have more in common with people on the other side than you think when it comes to which congressman, politician you want representing you.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where I think that's why that should be prohibited, at least in campaigning. Prohibited in a way that people start going, like, let's say that you get to a point where politics just gets neutral and people are really doing democracy. Mm-hmm. That it's taboo all of a sudden, after like 25 years, a politician comes out, it's like, they want to start doing this and they want to start doing that. That would be so weird for you to be like, what is this politician doing?
Wouldn't it be more practical for politics or for these government agencies to enact policies within their structures that say, you know, it's a violation of your like employee contract or your employee work agreement, that if, as in this role, if you start using us and them rhetoric like that, then you are no longer able to be in that position. You're fired. Like, that's a violation of the employee
right
contract.
When you start dividing up the people who voted for you.
Yeah. Because like it would be like any other job. Like in your what is the word for when they give you your list of your duties?
Mm-hmm.
Like, these are the jobs that you're going to perform at this job. What's that called?
The job description.
Job description. Yeah. In a job description for, let's say, President of the United States.
Right.
In the job description, it can say part of your job is to avoid using rhetoric that is us and them, that splits the country up or divides anyone up discriminatorily.
Yes. Then
once they do that in front of the world to see, whoever their supervisor is, I don't know if he has one.
Right.
But they should be able to say, you know, and maybe this is the justice system, the courts should be able to go, which I guess we just saw them try to do this with the whole impeachment trial, where it's like you violated the contract that you agreed to when you're
not supposed
signed
to
up.
take foreign help for a campaign. Right.
So I guess it didn't really work. So in this case maybe wouldn't work. But even that was already a law and it didn't work. That wasn't just a job description. So how do you enforce that when it gets that high up, you know?
Right. And that's where it's important that the people have gotten to agreement there. Because, like, again, I always have to bring up that your attitude towards it becomes taboo in the future. Because then it's a cultural thing where in this country, like, you come into this country and anywhere you go, people are only discussing the issues. They're not discussing the team.
Right.
They're discussing how the problems have been getting fixed. not who's been fixing all the problems and who's been causing all the disasters.
Exactly.
Again, like that's where it muddies up. And the other thing too is like maybe I'm not sure how much.
Here, we'll take a quick break and we'll pick right back up where we left off.
Perfect.
Yo, yo, yo. It was a hot night. Backyard, pretty girls in the moonlight. Sitting around the fireside singing songs and getting along. We had nerds and jocks,
Okay,
preps and
we're
goths.
back.
It was a
Welcome back, everyone. If you like what you've been listening to, please hit that subscribe button. And
And this is the Millennial Experience podcast. If you're wherever you're watching this, it's also available on. So we have it available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. If you want to listen in any of those places, you should be able to find it.
Perfect.
So, I liked what you just said about. This is something that should apply to the police for
Right.
sure.
Yeah, so just to contextualize something I'm worried about being misrepresented about what I said. The us and them speech, I mean, is where you divide something up in the context of government and trying to get into power by using us and them tactics. But I don't mean that it's supposed to ignore when there's issues that concern racism, which could easily be confused and pointed at as this division.
Mm-hmm.
This is not division. If things are caused by a racist feeling in a person in power, it is healthy to try to pinpoint that and fix it. Because whenever we talk about their existing laws for equality, well, those laws are only as effective as those who are in the power of enforcing them. So, what good are any laws that minimize racism
Mm-hmm.
if the enactors themselves are have racist feelings? And now, if you're saying, well, they have to follow the law. Well, the higher the power is, the easier it is to get away with these things. And so for me, like that doesn't fall into the us and them speech where because then you're going to ignore racial inequality and injustice if you're trying to just ignore the fact that, because sometimes, yeah, sure, it might not be race, but sometimes it really just really is. And if you are an authoritative figure with racism, you at least need to try and see that you're not. At least the law's there that you can follow. But again, that's up to them. There's nothing I can do,
Yeah.
about authorities applying their bias indirectly or directly or consciously or subconsciously. It can still be a potential unfairness there.
Yeah.
Right. But at least that doesn't divide people who are dependent on a competent government to not just keep the people fighting with each other, but keep the whole state united.
So what do you think the solution is?
A solution, because we appreciate our freedoms and liberties here. Like I said, I wanted to make sure I was clear about the fact that any one of us can go onto the street and say literally anything we want. There's consequences to yelling fire in a theater, so that's totally up to you.
And there's consequences to yelling, "Go get that guy."
Yeah, and there's consequences to yelling, "Go get that guy," and which are again up to you. What we as a society would have to decide is, are we the kind of society who would rather wait until the edge when someone got lynched or burned or tied to this and that, which has happened in the past? Are we the kind of society who waits for that to happen 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 100 times before we decide to say that's bad behavior, or that's something that should not be allowed, or that should be at least taboo, at least get there?
But aren't those things illegal?
All that lynching and stuff?
Yeah.
Yes, and yes, murder is illegal, but that's why I don't want to apply a law into free speech. But again, how do we decide to be as a country? Like,
because you can't even tell anyone to do those things.
Yeah,
it's illegal to tell people to do those things, and it's illegal to do them.
Right. And even if you told someone, I mean, But that's where it's important to consider implications, and that's why I wanted to make a distinction between who's saying this rhetoric, and that's why I wanted to make it directly, only specifically to politics and in government. That this is an obviously unhealthy tactic for the people. It may be beneficial for you, but it's unhealthy for the people, and the people should be a team. And the whole country should be one team.
It would be great if, as a society, when someone starts using this type of rhetoric, we could just, it's so taboo amongst all of us as a culture.
It's like immediately shunned and weird.
Immediately, we don't want you as our leader anymore.
Right.
In whatever position you're in. But unfortunately, no matter how many people on social media or the news or all over the world are standing up and speaking out against these things, it doesn't stop them.
I think I do have a solution.
What's the solution?
There really needs to be a harder push forward for a diversity in this government, especially, that our figures be as diverse as the country. Especially how proud we like to say that the country is a mixture of like all of the greatest ideas and the bravest people who decided to cross oceans and deserts to like work their ass off when they get here. That we be proud that we enjoy our creative our creativity and all the money that this country makes and all the things that come out of it is attributed to its diversity. And so we should be proud of that. But if I agree, if you do look at a picture of any politicians, like you kind of do mostly get a shade, which isn't bad, but it wasn't bad in 1700, 1800, but now it's diverse. And I think it's better for people to be able to look at the government and say it is representative of me. And you know what? Like, dude, there's nothing bad about it. Like, the Americas are freaking amazing. Like, we're all proud to be part of this continent and much more proud of a country that allows you to work really hard and reap the benefits. But again, when you have so much diversity, you cannot start to ignore the fact the imbalances that exist racially and justicely. You have to be careful, and I think that would be healthy, like in any workplace, to be more diverse. I think it's just healthy for your government to be diverse. If every single person was like, let's say, white or Asian or black or Mexican, every single person, everyone, then I see almost no problem that your government was only that race. Literally.
Yeah.
But it's just not like that anymore. And I think when you're talking about in a country as big and diverse as this one, you have to make more of an effort to try to make it diverse, not to try to bottleneck any specific group of people, any specific group. And that's why us superior to them speech, again, falls into that, because you think that one group of people is more deserving than another.
Right.
Whatever specifics, because this can exist in any country. It can exist in a country where it's all colored people too. So
to prevent what happened with Hitler, what's the solution?
Oh, what happened with it?
Right now, you cannot fine these people. You can't. They're not getting fired. They're not getting punished really in any way when they're using a huge political platform to say things like that along these us and them biases.
I think
what's the solution to prevent what happened with Hitler?
I think that's a good question that brings up how much power do the people really have to limit what the government can do,
and how. If they're the ones making the laws, they're not going to make laws that hurt themselves. Right. So it's up to us, kind of, to work outside of the law. To create a cultural taboos.
Right.
That work. We educate people about how you're not supposed to discriminate.
Right. If there's rich people in power now, I'm gonna assume there was rich people in power then, and that's who's always stayed in power. But I think what was unhealthy for the people was the fact that the rhetoric of splitting us up is what gave us so little power over the government. Because we
dividing up the rich and the poor.
Exactly, because look, you divide up the people and you start seeing the two governments there. So because you think you're the one who's right, you would allow more power to this government, but not allow more power to the other one. But if it's the same government and all their interests align, then then the people have to decide where their interests align, so you can power everything up to that. And we have to get rid of this, like, us and them, and we have to see where our interests align. But again, you're right. It brings up to the fact that if we all agreed that we wanted to disagree on us and them speech, and let's say 70% of us agreed, can we change it? Can we make some specific policy that controls government, us and them speech, and us and them rhetoric? Could we do anything currently? Are there any laws that give the power to the people to vote, or does this always go to the judges that
I think
that presidents?
It's up to us at that point. If we have 70% of the voting power, because 70% of the population
their
agrees,
interests align, right?
we would just not elect politicians that talk that way. If 70% of the people are voting,
right,
they're going to win with those votes. If we're voting along the lines of, we're not going to have someone that has us and them hate rhetoric,
right,
in their speeches.
And so that brings up the thing, let's say that we went back to the days where somebody like a community knew a guy and they were like, dude, you should really run for mayor. You know, I said dude because I'm a millennial. But they're like, we would like you to run. Whereas nowadays it seems like you need the money to run now. And that's what chooses your options. And so that kind of falls into, like I said, how much power do we have? Do you feel like you get to choose the representative? Or are the options put in front of you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like the options
are
it's a false sense of choice.
And that's where I'm kind of like, the people have to align. Like, you have to align what's important to you.
But that's why we need to start by re-evaluating our entire political system. Like, the fact that a super delegate can basically choose who's going to be the candidate.
Right.
That's broken.
Yeah, I agree.
Broken.
Anything that looks like a ton of power falls into a few people, you have to be concerned.
To me, it almost feels like
you have to be concerned.
The DNC and the RNC, to me, they feel like corporations.
Right.
Like it's a company of a group of people that has a business that they've weaseled their way into politics. And we've all just accepted it that there's Democrats and Republicans.
And this is how it is.
That's how it is. And they've done this by systematically making us believe that those are our two options. And then they basically, because they're a company, like a private entity, they can basically select their candidate, give us the illusion that we're actually making some kind of a choice. Right. They select their candidate, and each side puts their... It's like two companies picking, here you get to choose between this person and this person as your president. Right. Because of things like the Electoral College, we need to get rid of that. It's the stupidest thing in the world. I don't know of any person that can sit and argue a good reason to keep the Electoral College.
Right.
Like, every time I've asked anyone about it, it'd be interesting to have someone on the podcast with the opposite view. Yeah. But I've never heard a good argument for why we divide the country up and give so few people so many votes. Shouldn't it be popular vote that decides every election? If more than 50% of the population wants this person to be their leader, why isn't that how we vote? And the reason I've heard explained to me is it's because rural areas like farming communities and stuff have far, far less people per capita. And so they're not represented in a fair way because the people, you know, in the capital of Wyoming, and I don't know this for a fact, but let's say there's the majority of the population of Wyoming lives right there in that dense little area in the capital, or New York City, Manhattan, for instance, I'm sure has a very big population center compared to the rest of New York, the farming communities and stuff.
Nice.
essentially whatever mindset lives within that capital city
Mm-hmm.
based on their city lifestyle,
Mm-hmm.
they basically get to decide who becomes their leader because all the people live right there. So it's like one city is getting to pick the leader, and all these people living in the rural areas
Right.
aren't equally represented in that way because they might have vastly different opinions on who they want to run the country.
Right.
So they're all voting one way, but since the people in the city center outnumber them so much, they're essentially getting to pick for the whole state, which is the reason why the Electoral College is a thing. But it still doesn't matter to me. There's still
So is it a preventative measure to prevent the states that are the most populous to overpower the interests of the very, very small
like communities.
communities?
Yeah, I think that's
now,
the reason.
I kind of want to know though, if we are dependent on that agriculture, like that agricultural lifestyle and farmers, I don't see why it would complicate people in the urban areas. I don't see why it would be like a problem that their interests up in the urban areas overpowered or affected negatively in a way the lifestyle of the people who make your food. Like, a government can work that out.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, why are we it's so weird to create a problem. Like,
Because really,
we're gonna help them out. Like,
all
dude,
we're doing
that
when we're
food's
voting
important.
is we're picking someone to make these decisions for
Yeah,
us.
to manage it. Like, to
They're not just gonna completely forget about the farmers. Like,
yeah,
we still need food.
right.
So
Like, for example, like the like, let's say, like Utopia, you vote in a president, most people are information literate and scientifically literate, so there's a information and scientifically literate president. You can assume that he will have the best experts, and there won't be any of this. Like I said, sometimes this us and them rhetoric almost seems like they're actually creating a problem so that they can manage the people in a specific way. It's like making it seem as if, oh, well, if we give the city folk all the power, the country folk are gonna not be able to like grow their food. Of course, we have to consider it all. But this us and them mentality is gonna make it seem like that side and this side. If that side gets more to say, you're not gonna have say. Like, no, like the government should be working on everybody's interests.
Yeah,
And that's exactly the reason you would have picked a president who could see it all together as in one system, one body, veins, heart, like this whole system where you have agriculture and city and all of this business. Like stop saying us and them. Like there's a way to figure it out, but like why? It's not like just because I want people in the city to do well, I want people in the country to do bad. What's the best way you could do it for everyone? Stop freaking saying that this is going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm not afraid of the popular vote, because it's under the assumption that your government will be fair, not that your government is interested in splitting you up and using tactics.
Yeah. Because
but maybe,
I think
like,
we can
maybe
all agree
Mhm.
what we're doing now is not working.
At least not for everyone.
The system that we've implemented, that we've all accepted as the norm, is not giving us two candidates that it's hard to choose between.
Right.
Like where you're like, either of these people would be a really good leader.
Mhm.
And since I've been alive,
Mhm.
we've never had that. It's always two people that you're like, well, I guess I got to choose between the lesser of two evils. At almost every single election, if not every single one. There's never a time where you're just like, this person will be a really great leader. And I think implementing the popular vote would give us that, at least for the majority of the country. There will still be the outliers, the racists, the people that actively use this kind of us and them talk will probably not benefit from a popular vote, but I don't really care.
The only thing I kind of want to add in, because look, I'm a fan of there just being the raw popular vote. There's nothing more democratic than that, counting it and seeing the majority.
Count up the votes.
Yeah, but I really want to mention this. It was one of the past presidents who had mentioned, I'm not going to quote it right, But he had said it wasn't enough to enshrine rights on people, protections, in this case, the rights like the right to vote, but that the people had to be educated, and it was necessary that they understood what their vote, the implications that their vote was going to have. And so if you have a ton of people, let's just make a fucking bad example. You have a ton of people who really believe you need to do sacrifices to make a God happy, and that is the popular opinion.
Mm-hmm.
You got like a problem on your hands.
That's true. All right. We just did 40 minutes. So I hope you guys enjoyed. And definitely, if you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment.
Hit that
and
subscribe button.
let us know what you think about all this stuff about freedom of speech and the Electoral College. And
if anyone has information about like things we didn't consider that we should, absolutely put them in. Laws that we may not have considered, because we don't know everything.
Remember, we're just two regular millennials.
Right.
We don't know everything. We're not experts in
We're
any
just
of these
trying to
fields.
manage through it all.
We're just discussing our opinions and ideas about this stuff. So don't take our word for anything.
But please include your own opinion in the comments.
And hopefully the ideas that we're bringing up are helping to spark some thinking about these things.
Yes, a
in
little
you.
bit of activism in all of us.
Yeah. So thanks so much for listening, and have a great day.
And the songs that we played went something like